Good morning. Welcome back to Professional Insights, brought to you by the National Referral Network. Today's topic is one that is in the forefront of everybody's mind with all of the headlines buzzing about tariffs, inflation, recession risks. It is so easy to get caught up in the noise, and there is a lot of it. But understanding what's really happening beneath the surface is even more important. So today, I'm joined by Mike Clarke, co-founder of Protection Point Advisors, and we're going to help cut through some of the noise and help you understand what matters, what you should be looking at when it comes to the economy, your financial kind of outlook on things, where to look to get, information that suits your needs and all of that. So stay tuned for that. But before we get started, hit that like and subscribe button. We're here every Tuesday morning, and put your questions below. We will get them answered. So without any further ado, let's bring Mike in and get this started. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning. Good morning. How are we doing this morning?
Fantastic.
I've got the black sweater on. I'm slightly iconoclasting a little bit today. I just felt like I wanted to get my Steve Jobs on a little bit.
So, well, hey, let's get that Jobs on.
Right. Not that there's any comparison whatsoever.
So Mike, let's kind of, you and I spoke about this a little bit before we got on here, and we're going to kind of break these up into a little bit of a stage, kind of stages. But let's kind of start with the basics. When you hear people or clients talk about, the recession, it ranges from, I think I saw 45% up to 90%, depending on what news outlet you look at. Why is it important to first understand what a recession actually is rather than react to headlines?
Well, first of all, I think when you hear the term recession, I think it's been it's equated with something really bad, like something bad is happening economically, and we all need to prepare for it. While it's true that recession really is defined as declining GDP, it's 2 quarters of declining GDP. That's the academic definition of what a recession is. But is it as bad as the headlines would portray? It makes things tougher on people because it means that things are going backwards economically, and it's just economically harder. So I don't want to diminish it, but it's also part of a larger economic cycle, and economic cycles typically occur. And oftentimes we emerge out of recessions better off than we were before. So I don't want to portray it as a good thing. Okay. I also don't want to portray it as a calamity either. It's just something we from time to time kind of suffer through.
I mean, because there's a lot of, ever since COVID, there's some economists that talk about, hey, this is going to be a lost financial decade because of supply chains and a lot of ripple effect from COVID. And then obviously with the new administration and some of their things that they're doing. How should business owners and investors think about normal economic cycles like you just talked about in terms of expansion, contraction, and recovery? Because most people don't understand that.
Well, they don't. And certainly and by the way, I'm not an economist, so I'm not going to try to portray one here. Right. Okay. But you're right. Things are cyclical. Normal. What is normal?
Right. Right.
Normal seems to be a series of random, unexpected events that could not be foreseen. And I think that's kind of in some ways a story of market behavior. You have a market that's going this direction or that direction, and some unforeseen catalyst sort of throws it off its track, and then it begins to move another direction. And that's historically always what happens. But I guess in the larger sense, it also is historically what creates these different economic shifts where, we're expanding and then we're contracting and then we're hitting bottom and then we're going up again, So at the end of the day, it's cyclical. So what should investors do? Stick to the basics. Whatever. First of all, I'm big on saying, understand what you're investing for. And I don't think that's a question that often gets clarified to the extent it needs to get clarified. So understand really clearly what you're investing for. Then your investment approach should serve your long-term ends. It should serve whatever the goal is. Then if your investment approach is appropriate to what you are trying to accomplish, these cycles are going to occur. These different events are going to occur, and the best advice any of us can give anybody is just leave it alone, because history tells us that that kind of discipline is rewarded. So I know it's counterintuitive. Investors often say, well, when bad things happen, how should we react? Well, there's a difference between a response and a reaction. Reactions will cost you money. Responses really are about enhancing an existing process. So what you do is you do nothing other than to stick to your process.
Mike, you've talked a lot about in our conversations on here, just individually with clients, the importance of keeping track of
Yeah.
certain, inflows and outflows, right? And one of the things that you just mentioned kind of caught my attention, because there's the economy, right? And then there's your economy.
Yeah.
How important is it for individuals, especially in these times, to keep track of their metrics and so they're able to stick to their plan?
That's a really important point, because when I think most people, when they think of the economy, they're not thinking of GDP or unemployment
Right.
or any of the things that you would read about in the Wall Street Journal. They're thinking about their economy. They're thinking about how much does milk cost?
Right.
you know. So if you're staring down the barrel at retirement, you want to retire in, say, 5 to 10 years, what have you. It's super critical to understand what your consumption needs will be then. And the best way to get your arms around that is to take a look at what your consumption needs are now. Like, how much money do you spend now? Okay. Um, and does it make you happy?
Right.
Because the last thing you want to do is go into retirement and be the first person in line at hometown buffet at 4 o'clock because you got a coupon. Nobody wants to live like that. So you want to get a sense of what it's going to take to live, more or less comfortably, but also you may want to look at where you might be spending too much money. You see ads regarding things like, I don't know, Mint or Rocket Money, these technologies that help you determine where you might be wasting money. Like, how many descriptions do I have? I didn't know I had 20. I thought I had 3, that kind of thing. So it's really important to take inventory over what you actually spend. Try to get yourself kind of in shape without, again, clipping coupons and, feeling like you're living close to the edge. Take reasonable inventory and try to get your arms around what your consumption needs actually are, because it really allows people like me to build a financial plan and an illustration of your future that's super precise and custom fit to you. And it gives the whole effort a whole lot more meaning.
Because as the broader economy contracts, expands, recovers, all these technical terms,
Mhm.
the individual's economy, like my economy, should
Right.
not be contracting and recovering and expanding on big waves, ups and downs.
I,
Would
I
that be an
think
accurate
well,
statement?
I think it's accurate, and I think it depends upon where you are in the life cycle. If you're older and you're about ready to retire, well, then it's important to understand what your consumption needs are, but also understand if you're younger, what typically happens if you are living a life economically that you're more or less happy with, then what happens over time is it gets easier because you start making more money.
Mhm.
Okay. A best example of that would be somebody who bought a house, I don't know, maybe 15, 20 years ago. Um, you could barely afford the mortgage payment probably when you bought it, but now it's like nothing.
Yeah.
So that's kind of typical in somebody's economic life. But again, it starts with just knowing what you need, why you need it, what you want, why it works, all that stuff. It really is more about why than what or how.
Understood. Understood. That's awesome. And so, Mike, there's a lot of reports. I mentioned this in the introduction.
Yeah.
Is that there is so much noise out there coming from news outlets, uh, financial institutions, a lot of it everywhere globally. What factors do professionals, economists, financial professionals generally look at when they assess like recession risks?
Well, again, I can't speak as an economist. I think, the economists are looking at more what we call fundamental economic metrics to try to sort of read the tea leaves and forecast, if there's going to be a recession. I mean, I think it's important to note that lately the headlines haven't matched the significance of the events.
Right.
Regardless of how you feel about the current policy directions economically and the things that have been tried and whatnot. I mean, the markets, I will say the market has kind of rendered its opinion on this. And it would appear that the policymakers have now went, okay, we heard you. Okay. So I can say that much. Um, but I think it's important to have perspective. The headlines again don't match the size of the event. For example, if you are looking at your retirement account, you've seen a lot of headlines. People are losing their 401ks.
Right.
Well, if you're losing your 401k and you're about ready to retire, and this event rather had you've lost significant portions of your 401k. First of all, I'm absolutely sympathetic to that, but you probably were taking way too much risk to begin with. Okay.
Yep.
And really just, it really is now that we are sort of on the other side of this. And I think the market's kind of licking its wounds a little bit and taking a look at maybe what is the next direction and, setting its sights a little bit further ahead. I think it's really important for investors who may have experienced some of that to take a look at what their allocations are and go, okay, is this right for me? I mean, I got whacked for a couple of weeks there. Maybe I was taking too much risk. Okay. Fortunately, probably made most of it back. Okay. And in the grand scheme of things, in spite of the fact that there is I'm trying to say this diplomatically, not a lot of agreement regarding the policy directions. I suppose you could say that. A lot of detractors. What I also want to say is the significance of the event wasn't that significant. So the headlines don't match the event. And if your portfolio did recover and it got unnecessarily clobbered, you really got to take a look at how much risk you're taking.
So, which is interesting, right? Because we talked a little bit about the stock market and how they see things, and they always talk about how certain events are priced into the market.
Right.
And so, how does consumer behavior shift early during periods of economic uncertainty like we've experienced compared to kind of a lagging indicator that the market may be, moving in a better direction? I don't know. But if it does, how do the consumer behavior shifts with those kind of economic trends?
Well, I mean, when people get scared, they stop buying stuff. Okay. I mean,
Okay.
when people are concerned and there's a lot of uncertainty about what lay ahead, that's a time when consumers tend to hoard money a little bit more. They're adopting a wait and see approach. And consumers have been out spending money a lot in the last 3 years. I mean, it's been kind of, I mean, a lot of that was all this money that was pumped into the system to save the economy during COVID. And, it's maybe you could argue that the government did too much of that. And he probably might win some of those arguments, but, I mean, it was done in the name of trying to make things better. And to be fair, our economy kind of came through the whole COVID thing better than just about anybody else.
Yeah.
There were bumps in the road and, things that didn't work and there were things that did. But so consumers have been outspending money. And now, given, tariffs and trade barriers and all this stuff, I think there's a sentiment out there that maybe they're not feeling as positive about things as they were. And that has an effect on the market and the way the market kind of prices itself. So I think there's some of that adjustment going on now.
I'll tell you what, you and I spoke about this. I just got back from Disneyland, and I'll tell you what, people are spending
Yeah, they are.
despite what's in the headlines.
Right.
And I don't know what a typical, weekend looks like at Disneyland down in LA or in Anaheim. And
Right.
this is the busier season because of spring break, but holy cow, there was no shortage of spending at Disneyland.
Well, I think I think often I've said this before, there's almost like there's sometimes two economies. There are people who can afford Disneyland and there are people who want to afford toothpaste.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
And I think that's you see that in different pockets of the country where you just don't see the economic advantages that you see displayed in places like Washington, New York, or Southern California. So again, so I think the economics of it are viewed more on a macro level than they are viewed on this, level of how many people are at Disneyland, as great as that can be for the people who can afford it.
Right.
So I think the market just interprets the data and goes, okay, where are we? And then looks forward 6 months or 12 months or whatever it is, and then kind of places its bets based upon what it thinks will be true then. And I think right now we have a market that is assessing a lot of data based upon what's happened in about, the last month or so, to try to determine where do we go from here. So it's super important for investors. Again, stay disciplined. Talk to your advisor if you have one. Your advisor will talk you down from the ledge. Ignore the headlines for the most part and stay the course.
And so how should individuals and even business owners, Mike, how should they balance this preparedness or their preparation, some of the things you just talked about, with opportunity when there's talk of a potential slowdown? Like how do you balance that fear and still trying to move your financial plan forward?
Well, fear is nobody's friend when it comes to money. I mean, that's a recipe for losing money, is to make decisions that are based in fear. It really is about sticking to your process. I mean, your process really should take into consideration events like this. And again, I don't want to belabor this point, but the significance of what's happened in the last month with tariffs and trade policy and all the stuff that's been making the headlines, the effect on the markets and money just hasn't been that significant. I mean, again, agree with it, disagree with it, the effect hasn't been that significant. So it's really important to note that if you maintained your discipline, you didn't change anything, you didn't get scared, you just came through this whole thing largely unscathed, other than you might have declined a few percentage points, but that's really, in the grand scheme of things, isn't significant.
And so we often hear advice, right? And this is not just financial. This is just in general life. Control what you can control,
Right.
right? And so in an economic context, in an investment standpoint, what does that mean for an average business owner or investor? What can they control?
Well, you can obviously control what you do. You can control sticking to your process. For example, if you're regularly contributing to your retirement plan, keep doing that. Okay.
Right.
There are advantages to buying into a market that is
It's
depressed.
down. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Stick to your investment discipline, but understand what your financial plan is telling you. Your financial plan should be a pretty accurate illustration of the results downstream, and you should be looking at if the results that are being illustrated are the ones you want. Okay, like, are you going to a place you want to get to? For the business owner, it means planning ahead. It means having a really good sized business reserve. Okay. It probably means taking a look at, I don't know, maybe even the efficiency of your operation and expenditures and things, just sort of regular inventory that business owners should take all the time anyway. And it's, maybe it's a time to just sort of reassess a lot of things and take stock of what the next move is, even though the next move really is kind of the same move.
Right. Right. And you mentioned some of these aspects of financial planning. A planner, we've talked about it before, about accountants and attorneys. How important is it to have a trusted team when navigating periods like this?
Oh, it's crucial. I mean, we live in a world now where you can't rely on one professional to just tell you everything. Your team of professionals, your accountant, your attorney, your financial advisor, everybody should be working together. They should be talking to each other when that's appropriate. And you should be interacting with them when that's appropriate, so that all of this worry is potentially off your shoulders, particularly when unexpected events happen. I mean, call your financial advisor if you get a little spooked, and just say, I just want to hear you say it's going to be okay. Chances are they'll tell you it's going to be okay. This is a team effort, but it starts with the individual. It starts with, knowing what you want. And if something significant happens, talk to your financial advisor. Just say, okay, how is the long-term result that we're aiming at here? Has that been affected in large part by what's going on now? Usually it hasn't. I talk with clients during COVID, during the bottom of what was a really awful, like, free fall. We looked at their financial plans, and even with that, their financial plans hadn't been affected, because any good financial plan is not only an illustration of what will be, it takes into consideration these black swan events. It has to.
So with the conversations though, Mike, are they different? I mean, I'm assuming they are, but are they different? And how are they different if somebody's retiring in 5 years, 10 years, or even 20 years?
No, they're not different, provided the advisor's done his job, his or her job, and allocated the portfolio correctly. If everything is compartmentalized properly, then it's really not anything other than a conversation that assuages fear and uncertainty, which is also part of the advisor's job.
Okay, understood. That's interesting. So to wrap up here, Mike, if you could leave the viewers with one mindset shift or core principle, or some nugget to help navigate some of these economic uncertainties, what would that be?
Well, number one, it's always go back to the basics. Circle back to what you want. Do you still want what you said you wanted when you talk to people about what you wanted? So get clear on what outcome are you aiming for. Then, has that outcome been somehow damaged, if you will, from current events? Chances are it hasn't, if you have approached all this in a very big picture way. You've allocated your investments optimally and appropriately and all that stuff. If you've set the sails on everything correctly, and you've done that in concert with your advisors, that's what there is to do. Because as the saying goes, the volatility is the price you pay for the returns you need on your investments that will help you make the most of your money. It's a really simple sort of rinse and repeat that tends to go out the window in the face of uncertainty and fear. And
Right.
And just understand, headlines are just headlines. I mean, they're meant to provoke as much as they are meant to inform, because that's how newspapers have done it. Now TV does it, podcasts, whatever, the
social media people,
everybody's doing it.
Yeah, everybody's doing it.
Yeah, it's and I'm not at odds with it, oddly enough. I mean, everybody's got the media is a business, and the business, any business is trying to be successful, but just understand what it is you're watching. I will say, to me, so much of it is to information what fast food is to nutrition. Look, if I want to go get a double with cheese every now and then, it's pretty good.
It is good.
I'm just not going to live off of it. That's
right.
Okay.
Right. Well, Mike, I appreciate it. Please hit that like and subscribe button. We are here every Tuesday. We have conversations just like this to help you get clarity, disseminate information on a variety of financial topics. Leave your questions below. But until next Tuesday, Mike, thank you very much. I appreciate the time.
Until next time.
Okay. Bye now.